Hey, I think you find it's 10 o'clock, so I'll start the meeting. Welcome everybody to this meeting this morning of the People's Scrutiny, where we are being asked to scrutinise two areas of the Council's operations which are in front of us today. And that's agenda item 4 being empty homes with an update, which is showing us 3 options. And agenda item 5 being local housing market assessment refresh 2022 to 2037 again, which is showing 2 options. May I at this stage welcome the officers in the chamber, Ian Blakewell, Sally Merrick, Claire Hamer and Helen Horton. May I also take this opportunity to explain to the members of the public who are here today, or maybe those online or listening and watching, so that there is no misunderstanding about the role of the Scrutiny Committee members and their powers. Scrutiny committees are such and do not have powers to make decisions, but purely offer its recommendations to the Cabinet to aid it in their decision-making going forward. And the last point, as normal, may I point out that these committee meetings and scrutiny are non-political. So can we move on then to the first agenda item, which is the apologies for absence. We have an apologies for absence from Councillor Edwards, but a substitute being Councillor Webb. Is there any other apologies, Hazel?
Yes, we have apologies for Councillor Bromfield and Councillor Haworth today, but no substitutions, Chair.
Thank you. So item 2, are there any declarations of interest, please? If you do find that there are, perhaps you could point it out going forward, please. Thank you. There are no public forum. So Scrutiny Committee will open its guidance and move straight into item 4, agenda item 4, which is empty homes update. And perhaps I can move on to the officer who is going to open the presentation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Morning, everybody. My name's Ian Bakewell, and I'm the Housing and Communities Manager for the Council. I'm responsible for the Council's housing function. I'll be presenting the report today. I've got my colleagues Helen Horton and Claire Hamer, who are far more involved with the day-to-day operational side of empty homes, and you know, we'll be happy to answer any queries that may arise. So the purpose of the report is purely to provide a general update to the committee on the approach that we take to empty homes. I'd like to go back approximately just over a year ago, when the council was probably revisiting conversations about empty homes in respect of council tax and the introduction of premiums, which obviously was agreed by the council and is now operational. At that time, we as a team reviewed our approach to empty homes. It generally sat with one person, and we concluded that we weren't given enough staff resource. So we undertook a restructure, and it essentially resulted in us being able to put 2 members of staff towards it, which is Helen and Claire. And Helen and Claire are able to give it more of a weekly approach rather than dipping in and out and it being a victim to other priorities. So that was the starting context. So since Claire and Helen have been in post, it's enabled us to make significantly more contact with empty homeowners than we've ever done before. So the purpose of the report really is start really with that we this time last year we were working with council tax colleagues who provide us with all the addresses of empty homes that they've got records of, and we were talking. 541 were on that list. Not all of those were 12 months plus, and that's what I'm referring to. So when I'm talking about empty homes, I'm talking properties that have been empty for more than 12 months. So not quite all of those 541 were 12 months plus, but that's the best benchmark we've got in terms of being able to report to you. And the work that the team have done with council tax over the year has reduced that figure down to 366. I think what we're finding as a team is, and we've tried to draw it out of the report, I think you associate empty homes as often in poor condition, blights on the landscape, in the environment, problematic. I think it's probably fair to say that, fortunately, Monmouthshire isn't in that position, and many of our empty homes are that there is quite often a story behind, and quite often Helen and Claire will get involved with those stories, those circumstances where perhaps somebody has been left a property in a will, properties are up for sale, come across bereavement situations and emotional attachments to properties, and I say host of other reasons as well. But typically it's not. We don't find it straightforward, and people aren't leaving homes empty just for the sake of it. Really, I think that's the point really I want to make. So as a team, we have got a toolkit, and our approach in terms of contacting all of those empty homeowners is a friendly one, a supportive one, a helpful one, so we approach people with standard letters, and basically it's to promote the facilities that we've got available for empty homes. And over the last year or so, the tools that we've got available to us have actually grown. And that's probably largely due to Welsh Government making grants, loans available. And I've done a list of the opportunities that are available that we can signpost people to or support people to. I think the reality is that one of our drivers is there is a lack of accommodation that you'll be aware of in Monmouthshire, and Sally will talk about that later. Probably the reality of many of the empty homes, if they do come back into use, you can probably expect them to go back into use into the private sector. There is potential for obviously them to be used for either the homeless team, if an owner was willing to lease them, or a housing association can potentially buy, or a housing association could lease. But I think the likelihood of those happening are probably quite few and far between. So where we've got to in terms of the work that Helen and Claire have done, we have done more engagement and had more contact with empty homeowners than we ever had before. And I say that's in partnership with the council tax team and the premiums. Helen and Claire will get involved with council tax premium queries, but they are signposted back to council tax in that regard. So we've got to the stage now where we've so we've got down to 366 empty or recorded empty homes, and the year's work has largely been, it's been around supporting owners, helping them, steering them in the right direction, and I think we're getting to the stage now where of those 366, it's like taking those next steps in terms of engaging with owners, but and in the nicest possible way, we put a little bit more pressure in terms of those properties. Trying to encourage them not to leave them empty, trying to get them to consider whether there are solutions available to them that they would benefit from as well, not just Monmouthshire. As I said earlier, at the beginning, we have accepted by the surrounding communities. As yet, we've not gone into any enforcement steps, but that's something that Claire and Helen will be discussing with the likes of environmental health, building control, and planning. So we've got 366 on a positive, supportive, hopefully helpful approach, which we will continue. And it's whether there is any scope really to take a more formal approach with the odd property. So it wouldn't be many at all as we go forwards, and obviously continuing to promote the grants and loans and options available to people to bring their home back into use. So I don't think there's anything else really much that I can add to that. So if there are any questions, obviously we're happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Ian. Did you say that Sally wanted to say anything at this stage, or there's not anything that they want to? No, it's just... Okay, fine. Okay, yeah, there are a few questions. Can I call on Councillor Stephen first, please, to ask the question on 3.5, which are around grants?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You did mention about the initiatives of empty homes grants. I was interested in reading the interest-free home improvement loans, interest-free empty homes loans. How are these initiatives promoted and how are they implemented? Just two simple questions. Thank you.
They are. We used to run those in-house. Basically, we were given 2 pots of money by Welsh Government. One was a grant, and one is a loan that we've got to pay Welsh Government back. But it gives us approximately £1 million to play with, and we have outsourced the delivery of those loans to a community banking called Robert Owen Banking. They're actually based in Powys, and one of the requests to them from us was around marketing and promoting the availability of those grants. And most of the work they've done, correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, has been on social media, but they have done a lot of. It's very, very visible on our social media accounts. They've got a website as well. Do they do any others? Any other? So it is heavily promoted via social media, and as a result of that promotion, the number of loans that we've given out. Again, it's the highest number of loans that we've ever done previously. It's not a big number. It was it 14 last year? Yeah, so we have 5 applications already this year. They're not for empty homes, though, are they? They're just general home improvement works.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is that okay, Councillor Stevens? Can I just ask one question, please, Ian, about promotion? I wonder how close you are to the local councils throughout Monmouthshire, town councils. Are they aware of that? Because I think that's an area where we could make sure that the residents of Monmouthshire as total are aware of the availability.
That's a really good point, actually. I couldn't answer that question, but we can certainly take that away, and we can contact all of the the town and community councils and make them aware. We've got literature that we can send as well. So,
thank you. Next question then from Councillor Jones about occupied homes, and that is number 3.8 section.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I've got 2 questions, in fact. So I'll ask the other one first because it's carrying on from the previous one. The empty homes grant and the long-term leasing one, well, say the empty homes grant. Does a house have to be empty for a specific period of time before a grant can be applied for? Because otherwise it seems a fairly easy way of getting 25,000 to do up a house. That's one question. And then the second one is, in 3.8, you've actually said that some homes recorded as empty were actually occupied. Could that be clarified, please? Does that mean illegally or unregistered for some reason? So just clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a legal situation. I'm probably not going to be able to answer that in full because that's the council tax information that they've provided to us. I think basically I think I can say that council tax records around empty homes weren't 100% accurate, and the work that the team have done have obviously brought a few issues to the surface, which has regularised everything. So.
Yeah, so the house has to be empty for 12 plus months and unfurnished. So there's no sign that anyone has been living in it for that 12-month period. And then also the property owner has to live in that property for 5 years following the completion of the works through the grant. Yeah, so, okay.
That is actually a weakness of the grant, that the owners got to move in because most owners have got somewhere to live, so it does restrict.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Jones? The answers. Yes, thank you. Can I then invite Councillor Riley, please? I don't have the number, I'm afraid, so we will have to enlighten us with that. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair, and I have to apologise. I got my 2 questions in the wrong order. The one is for the next item, the one that I spoke about earlier. So the one I wanted to ask for this particular item is what enforcement looks like. You have said that there is going to be a little more pressure, perhaps applied now for people who have not been particularly helpful, and I wondered what powers you can enforce. And I'm also aware of trusts within Monmouthshire where people have large estates which they may live in but might have 1 or more cottages within the grounds, and where that trust, the council tax, might be part of the whole estate. I'm wondering how you tackle those issues. There are a number of them. Thank you.
I mean, I think trust. I'll start with trust, if you don't mind. I think that's a really important part of this, because the contact and engagement that we have with owners. We want it to be positive. We want it to be a collaborative approach. So that would be my starting point with everything that we do. In terms of say, like making the approach a little bit more formal. The letters that Helen and Claire send at the moment are friendly, helpful, signposting, but then there is the scope to obviously start building in the expectations of the authority in terms of not having properties that are potentially problematic. In that regard, we will work with our colleagues in building control, environmental health and planning. They've got a number of enforcement powers, and I've listed a handful in 3.7 in the report. What we don't know is whether there is scope to use those powers, and part of our conversation internally with those other teams would be to can we use these powers? Should we use these powers? I think it would also be important and relevant that if we did use those powers, we involve legal services as well. And I think if we did use any of these powers, it would be really be relatively small numbers in the grand scheme of things. But I think that's where I'm particularly interested. So we've got a handful of properties that are in a quite poor condition, and I suppose I'm asking the out loud question: should we be looking at something a little bit more formal with these properties?
Would you mind if I just came back a little bit on that? Because where there are trusts with a number of properties and estates, quite often those properties are not in poor condition. They are just part of an estate and might be empty. So I fully take on board, because I appreciate what you're saying. It's about should we or would we take enforcement action, and that was really just of interest to me. But yeah, there are the places that I'm thinking about really are not in poor condition.
No, and as I said, most properties that we deal with aren't in a bad condition. And the starting point really is what are the circumstances? What are the circumstances behind those properties being empty? It's not about us piling in indiscriminately, because so I know there's empty properties in the county that are due to be refurbished, and they're probably going to be, it's probably going to take quite some time for those properties to be refurbished. So again, it would be unreasonable for us to be taking action in those sort of circumstances. So it's listening to the owners and trying to support and help the owners. And I think if we know there's a resolution down the line, well, I think that's fine.
Sorry, can I be just a little bit pedantic? If it's a trust and they're not registered individually for council tax, but they're in beautiful condition and there are a number of them, how would you know about them?
We probably wouldn't, because the list we use is the one that council tax providers.
Thank you, Ian. That's answered my questions. Thank you.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Riley?
I am. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Webb then, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the report. Ian, I'm just wondering, is there any way we can pick up, in particular in rented accommodation, where there's 2 occupants and they with two bedrooms rather, and very often these aren't needed, and a 1-bedroom property would be more appropriate. I've got a case in my ward, and I'm sure there's many others where particularly older people only want a 1-bedroom accommodation. Is there any way we can pick these up, or is that going too far? Thank you.
It wouldn't. That wouldn't. You're talking under occupation there, aren't you? Yeah, yeah. So we wouldn't pick that up under empty homes work, but I know the housing associations regularly undertake exercises to identify where they've got properties, you know, that, as you say, might have a single person living in a larger house, and you know, we'll try and encourage people to downsize or think about moving to something. So yeah, so that it's not a daily activity, I believe, but it's, you know, it is revisited on a periodic basis, because it, as you say, it does release properties that are very much needed.
Thank you.
Okay, can I then move on, please, to Councillor Strong, and I think it's item 3.10.
Okay, just thank you for the report. It's really sort of enlightening, especially as it's a sort of new area, you know, that we're sort of spearheading through. And interesting to see that the number of empty properties has dropped from sort of 541 to 366. I'm quite interested in sort of outcomes and the effectiveness of any interventions that we're doing. Do we know how many of the properties that you've had discussions around have actually gone on then to be privately rented in the sort of private sector? Do we know that? No, or you wouldn't actually track those properties? Just a sort of question, really.
Again, I think tracking's. I think that's a good expression, actually, because I mean, what we do know is that there are. So, like, if you look at the table above, for example, the number of applications for empty homes grant, 36, and the number of lease enquiries received. What we do know is that we do know that where there is take up, you know, that obviously will result in an empty home. Not all enquiries do result. So the lease enquiries, that's not resulted in any coming into empty. So it's people approaching us around what we offer, and but say it doesn't always turn out into the outcome that we want. So
I guess, sorry, Chair, I guess the message is that, you know, the council doesn't want homes empty for long periods of time, and that you have discussions with people, but if that can't be resolved, then there are penalties, because they'll have to, the council tax will increase, won't it?
Yeah, and I think I'm probably not the best person to speak on behalf of council tax, but I do know that it's, you know, from the conversations that Jane and Helen are having, it is obviously making people think about in respect of that financial penalty. And I think probably, you know, I think it will be, it's a really important part of the toolkit in respect of what we've got available, because obviously that's, you know, it's only just kicked in terms of April, so it will be interesting to see how that, you know, what difference that does make as we go forward.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Strong?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian, very much for coming back with the answers to the questions. Are there any more questions? Can I ask Councillor Powell first and then come back to you, Councillor Jones?
Thank you. You have houses sometimes that are completely empty of people, but are still furnished. And where would they come in a line? Would they be classed as empty houses? You know, sometimes somebody's died or they've gone home, some of the house is empty, nobody living there, and the furniture's still there, so they wouldn't be classed as empty because they've got furniture in, I suppose. How would that work?
Yeah, they're not classed as empty, but I think the inquiry could still come through and we could send it back to council tax, and if they have evidence that it has been empty for long enough and maybe the person has passed away, and there's evidence of the property being for sale, you know, that it's gone through that process, I think it can be sort of investigated as to whether they could still apply for that empty homes grant.
That's right, yeah, because sometimes it seems a shame when you see somewhere like that and it's empty for several years and you think somebody could be living there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, then, please.
Yes, sorry about coming back in. It was just I'd like to follow through on the previous question when you said that the owner had to live post receiving a grant for 5 years in a property. And I was just wondering whether it could be a member of the family who could live there instead. So, you know, they're perhaps a grown-up child or something, you know?
It has to be the registered owner of the property.
Right.
Yeah.
So they could do a swap the other way, perhaps. Yeah, okay, doesn't seem very fair. And just can I ask one more thing? Thank you. In Usk, there's a property that has been up empty for many years. It was a commercial property, but it's an ideal, but it was also lived in. And it's ideal for flats or a house, and everybody talks about it, and it's wonderful, and everybody wonders why nothing is being done about it. I have actually brought it up in council before, and I just don't understand how this perfect property, which could house several families perhaps, is still empty and deteriorating.
Is this the property at the far end of town, as you drive now?
It's the Royal that was in Usk.
Oh, right, okay.
By the British Legion.
Right, okay.
Which was overlooking the river. It's also got land at the back, which I think had planning permission at one stage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential there. And this is many years, 20, 30? I can't remember. I'm saying that online, and I put somebody come back.
I think in terms of how we've configured empty properties and empty homes, we will get involved with empty properties, but that's the main focus for that is the regen team.
Right.
You know, we will overlap with the regen colleagues if needs be. But, but we could probably get it. I'm trying to arrange to see what the position is with that property.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ian, and your team for well presenting the issue in front of us. As members, we have in front of us 3 options, and that's option 1, 2 and 3. Are there any other issues you want to discuss about that? And we don't actually vote, but we need to agree a way forward so that we can put that forward to the Cabinet decision. As I said, option 1 is to engage with empty properties, and it looks to me like it's fully compliant. Option 2 doesn't give us the same degree of options, and neither does option 3. So is it in order that we make a recommendation that option 1 go forward for Cabinet to discuss? And if so, can you just show of hands so that we're all in agreement? Thank you, members, and obviously.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this won't follow on to Cabinet. There's not a decision here as such, so it's just an update for yourself. What I would hope is that we'll probably be able to bring you additional information as we go into another year around this, so our knowledge will improve, and whether then, you know, depending on the individual properties that we get involved with, there may need to be individual decisions made about those in terms of enforcement, perhaps. So, but at the moment, this is just an information report.
Thank you, Ian. Can I just call upon Hazel to the summing up, please, on this section?
Yeah, so we've asked questions around the nature of the Empty Homes project, how it works, how many empty homes we had at the start of the year and then the year end. We've talked about the challenges and the opportunities of the project, future plans and next stages. We also asked about the criteria and conditions for empty homes grants, and we requested that as an action that the officer contacts town and community councils to make them aware of the availability of the loans and grants. We talked about how empty homes, loans and grants are promoted. We also discussed enforcement powers, and we asked that the team progress discussions with building control, environmental health planning and legal services on the scope and feasibility of using enforcement powers for problematic empty properties. And then finally, we talked about trusts and estates and how we as a council can explore how to identify and engage with the trusts and estates that may have empty properties that are not registered individually for council tax. So it seems the committee is broadly supportive of option 1 being continued and would like to be kept updated on progress in due course. Does that reflect your discussions today? And if so, we'll pass that on to the officers afterwards just to sort of remedy those actions. And we'll build it into the future work programme, and you can just let us know when you think would be the next sort of timely update. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Hazel, for that. So can we move on then to agenda item 5, which is the Local Housing Market Assessment Refresh 2022 to 2037. Again, do you want to open up with the presentation, Ian, or any of your colleagues? Okay, thank you. Over to you then, Sally, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Thanks for having me along today to present this local housing market assessment refresh that I've undertaken. So I'm Sally Mayrick. I'm the Affordable Housing Strategy and Policy Officer. So part of my remit involves assessing affordable housing need and advising on affordable housing need. So I prepared a presentation to go through with you this morning and just trying to set out the key points from the document. Obviously, it's quite a lengthy report. It's quite technical as well, so I've tried to keep it fairly brief, but it does get a bit technical at times, so sorry about that. I've just realised I'm not on... Oh, apologies. I'm going to slideshow mode. There we go. Okay, so just to start off with a bit of introduction to local housing market assessments. So all local authorities are required to undertake a periodic review of housing needs, and we do this by producing a local housing market assessment. This provides an estimation of affordable housing shortfall, and it's broken down by area and by tenure. So local authorities are required to do a full rewrite of our LHMA every 5 years and refresh that data once in that 5-year period. And they're important for providing an important evidence base. They inform things like local development plans, housing strategies, inform the allocation of social housing grant, and they help in discussions with developers about affordable housing requirements on Section 106 sites. This LHMA has been undertaken using Welsh Government guidance. So Welsh Government produced some new guidance in 2022, and it was a requirement of all local authorities to undertake to refresh their or undertake their LHMAs using this new guidance and a new tool that was produced as well, and we've had to submit them to Welsh Government at the end of March. So this one has been submitted to Welsh Government. Obviously, it is subject to Cabinet approval. Previously to the new guidance and tool that came out in 22, all local authorities were operating a slightly different methodology. So this new guidance and the new tool means that all local authorities are undertaking their reviews in a consistent method, and it means that need can be compared more consistently across the whole of Wales. Just to talk about the actual methodology a little bit. So the LHMA itself involves a really comprehensive analysis of various sets of data. So first of all, we look at our existing need. So we get that from our housing waiting list. So there are currently about 3,500 people registered on Monmouthshire's housing waiting list. Of those, around 2,000 have a recognised housing need. So for the purpose of the LHMA, we're only using the figures for the people that are actually in housing need. Anyone can register to go on the housing waiting list, but people have to meet certain eligibility criteria to be found in housing need. So, for example, if someone earns sufficient income to, or has sufficient savings to be able to afford their own property, we wouldn't class them as being in housing need. Or if somebody doesn't have a local connection to Monmouthshire, for example, so we discount those people. We also remove anybody that's registered on the housing waiting list that's an existing social tenant. So people may be in social housing, but for some reason that accommodation is no longer appropriate to their needs. So perhaps they need a bigger property or a smaller property or need to move to a different area. So we discount those figures because although they're in housing need, they don't need an additional affordable home. The next set of data then we look at is people that we expect to fall into housing need due to homelessness. So I'm sure everyone's aware that since the COVID pandemic in 2020, changes were brought into homelessness legislation and guidance, which has meant a significant increase in the number of homelessness presentations, the number of people that the council has a duty to accommodate. So looking at an average of the last 3 years' data, there are around 370 households presenting each year. So we sort of factor those figures in. A large proportion of the people that are presenting and in temporary accommodation are single people, and there's also a significant number that have got support needs as well. The next data set then we factor in is the newly arising need. So this just means the amount that we expect the population to grow over Monmouthshire over the course of the LHMA. We get this from Welsh Government's 2018-based household projections. Welsh Government provide different projections, different variants, which predict different levels of growth. We've used the higher variants that predict a higher level of growth because that aligns more closely with the replacement local development plan preferred strategy that's been agreed by council. It also reflects more closely with the actual population figures reported in the census from 2021. From those figures, we then need to deduct the planned supply of affordable housing. So we get this from the registered social landlord development programmes and from affordable housing being delivered as part of Section 106 agreements. So we look at the expected number of affordable housings coming through within the next 5 years. And we also factor in the turnover of existing stock. So there'll be a certain number of properties within our existing social housing stock that will come up on an annual basis. We take an average of the last 3 years for that. Apologies, gone too far there. Apologies for this. So before going into the actual findings of the LHMA, I thought it'd be useful just to recap on the definition and tenures of affordable housing, because these are referred to throughout the document. So for the definition of affordable housing, we work within the Planning Policy Wales definition, and that is housing where there are secure mechanisms in place to ensure that it's accessible to those who can't afford market housing. There are different tenures of affordable housing that are defined. So you have social rented housing, and that's where rents are set at Welsh Government benchmark levels. Social rented accommodation is all provided by registered social landlords or local authorities. Then you have intermediate housing, and that's homes where the cost is above social rent but below that of market levels. And in the intermediate housing category, you've got two forms of tenure: intermediate rent, which is typically set at about 80% of market rent, and low-cost home ownership. So in Monmouthshire, we provide a shared equity form of low-cost home ownership, and that's where an RSL will provide an interest-free equity loan of up to 50% of the value of the property. We don't provide shared ownership, which is where there is a rental to pay on part of the property, and that's because we consider shared equity as more affordable for people in Monmouthshire due to high property prices. Our stock of affordable homes in Monmouthshire consists of over 6,200 homes, and they're mainly provided by three housing associations, which is Monmouthshire Housing Association, Melin Homes and Pobble, and the majority is provided as social rented accommodation. For the purpose of the LHMA, we also need to set some assumed income thresholds and affordability levels. So sort of important to stress that these are average figures that I've provided. The LHMA does go into a bit more detail, covers different areas. It's also important to say that these aren't applied to things like the social housing register. They're kind of average figures that we use in the LHMA calculation, and it allows people to be allocated to the correct form of tenure. We work within the Welsh Government guidance and the Welsh Government assumptions. So for social rent, the advice from Welsh Government's technical working group is that the upper threshold for social rent should be set to the 30th percentile of private rent, equating to no more than 35% of someone's household income. The private rent figures we get from Rent Officers Wales, and we also have access to a system called Home Track. So Home Track provides a lot of information, accurate, up-to-date, reliable information about the housing market, so property sales, property lettings, and valuations as well. So applying those figures, we come to a figure of approximately £28,000 for the whole of Monmouthshire. So that essentially means that anybody that earns less, £28,000 or less will be allocated to social rented accommodation. For the market housing, the threshold is based on median rent, where median rent equates to no more than 30% of household income. So using those figures again from Rent Officers Wales and Home Track, we come to an average of about £36,500 for Monmouthshire as a whole. Looking at the home ownership thresholds, we base these on an assumed entry-level property price of £250,000, which is based on the lowest quarter of semi-detached properties in Monmouthshire. And we can also then apply the figures that we get from Welsh Government and UK Finance that tell us that the average first-time buyer in Monmouthshire spends about 5 times their household income on a property. So that's where we come to the figure of about £49,500 per year. And the intermediate housing thresholds then are in between the social rent and market housing categories. For the purpose of the LHMA, we need to identify some housing market areas. So these housing market areas should be geographical areas that are based on the areas that people live and are willing to travel to work. We've identified 4 in our LHMA, so that's the Aberfenny, Chepstow, Monmouth, and also the Banau Brycheiniog Park. So as you can see, the Chepstow is the largest housing market area, and that's because it includes the towns of Mega, Undy, Roggett, Usk and Raglan, as well as Chepstow itself.
Sorry, Chair. Could I ask a question now, because it's about that? Could I just ask a question?
No, not. Yeah, leave the presentation, come forward. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay, no problem. I can always come back and show it on the screen again. Yeah. So we've included the area of the Banau Brycheiniog Park for the local development plans so that the need can be disaggregated across each of the local authority areas. So then coming on to the actual housing estimates themselves. So the LHMA has estimated a need for 499 additional affordable homes per year over the first 5 years of the LHMA period. As you can see, the majority of these are needed as social rented accommodation. So it's around 82% required as social rent, with about 9% each for intermediate rent and LCHO. As you can see, the highest need is within the Chepstow housing market area, which we expect, given that covers the largest area and has the largest population. The social rent is also broken down by bedroom size. So you can see there we've got a high proportion needing 1-bedroom accommodation. So that works out about 80% is required as 1-bedroom. One of the sort of driving factors behind that high social rent and high 1-bedroom need is the homelessness presentations we've talked about. And such a high proportion of people requiring homelessness or requiring temporary accommodation rather are single people. The LHMA breaks the affordable housing need estimate into 2 periods. So the initial 5 years, it's assumed that all the backlog of need will be met within the first 5 years. The following 10 years then is made up just of newly arising need. So those numbers are much lower. So for the remaining 10 years of the LHMA period, it is 90 affordable homes that are needed each year. It's sort of important to say that although these figures are obviously quite high, so 499 homes per year, we're not saying that this is a new build delivery target, not least because it wouldn't be achievable or realistic, but also because there are other ways of delivering affordable homes. So colleagues talk about empty homes, bringing empty homes back into use. There are also opportunities to purchase homes from the open market to be converted to provide affordable homes. There are financial support that could be offered to people to help them access the private rented sector as well. And we've also got to bear in mind our desire within the council to develop balanced and sustainable communities that provide homes for future households. The LHMA also provides an estimate of market housing need. My focus obviously is on the affordable side, but just to share with you the market housing figures that are coming out as well. So these find that there's a need for 126 market homes per year, and that's throughout the whole LHMA period. Of those, 86 should be private rent and 41 are needed as owner-occupier. So just to sort of recap, these are figures based on a snapshot in time, and they're based on average income levels and private rented figures and house sale figures as well. The LHMA also covers the need for specific housing requirements. It finds that there's a range of specialist supported housing required. So the information for this section comes largely from existing plans and strategies, as well as affordable, as well as housing register data. So Monmouthshire Council has previously undertaken a housing support programme strategy and rapid rehousing transition plan. There are also sort of regional pieces of work that have gone on looking at the needs for group people with specific needs, such as the Gwent Regional Partnership Board Capital Strategy. And these were quite comprehensive pieces of work in themselves, so they've been reflected within this LHMA. This section identifies there's a need for an additional accessible, adapted and bespoke accommodation. So people requiring accessible accommodation wait on average longer than people needing general needs accommodation. We also find that there's a need for more additional self-contained temporary accommodation. So still accommodating high numbers of people in temporary accommodation. A proportion of those are in bread and breakfast and shared accommodation. The aim is to provide self-contained for everyone. We've got quite a lack of supported accommodation within Monmouthshire. We have a number of individuals with high support needs, and we currently have no provision to meet that need. There's also a range of supported and residential accommodation needed for children and young people, individuals with mental health needs, learning difficulties, and older people and people living dementia. And we're sort of doing ongoing work with social care colleagues just to identify a bit more detail about what is needed in terms of the numbers, types of properties and the location. So just coming on a little bit to the housing market in Monmouthshire. So although this was a refresh that I've undertaken, you wouldn't necessarily need to do a full review of the housing market for a refresh. I've just done a bit of a brief overview because it does change on quite a regular basis, and we've obviously had the census data that's come out a couple of years ago as well. So the average property price for Monmouthshire stands at about £356,000, which, as you can see, is significantly higher than the average for Wales of around 217,000. Monmouthshire is consistently one of the highest local authorities in terms of house prices, if not the most expensive local authority to live in. When we compare that to the household income data, it kind of shows just how unaffordable home ownership is for many people in Monmouthshire. So the household income data we get from a system called Khaki Paycheck, and that provides household income estimates down to ward level and even at postcode level, and they show that the median income for households for 2023 was about £36,000 for Monmouthshire, and that's higher than the Wales average of about £28,000. But what we do see from the data is that people that live and work in Monmouthshire earn comparatively less than the people that live in Monmouthshire, which tells us that people that are employed outside of the county are the higher earners. The house price to household income ratio gives us a good indication of affordability of properties, and at 8 to 1, that is higher than the average for Wales, which is about 6 to 1. Obviously, there are sort of disparities or variations across Monmouthshire, so the more rural, expensive areas, it can rise up to about 10 to 1. Just a bit of an overview of the private rented sector then. So there are about 3,000 landlords that are registered with Rent Smart Wales currently, and they represent about 4,800 properties. I'm sure everyone will be aware that the private rented market is quite challenging to access currently. Prices have been rising at quite a fast rate. People are struggling to find suitable private rented properties when they're losing their private rented accommodation, just consistently high demand and low supply. The annual increase across Wales as a whole over a 12-month period was 9.9%, that's on new lettings, and Monmouthshire is probably a little bit higher than that as an average. Colleagues within the Housing Communities Department did a desktop study of the private rented market in 2022, which showed that there was a marked decline in the number of lettings coming onto the market. So it declined by about 65% between 2012 and 2022. What we saw was it peaked in 2013 and dropped off down to a low in 2020, and then did start to pick up a little bit, and presumably COVID is playing a part there, where people weren't moving in the first months of COVID. Just provided some figures for you there, just to give an average of the current rental prices that we've got from Home Track data. So I won't go through all of these, but you can see for a one-bedroom property, the average was about £676 per month, rising up to about £1,500 for a four-bedroom property. So when you compare that to the LHA rates, which were in place until just last month, you can see that people on lower incomes reliant on the local housing allowance would really struggle to afford private rented accommodation. The LHA rate has now increased, so beginning of this month it increased, and the figures there show you that it has actually increased by a significant amount. However, when we do sort of periodic searches of properties available on the rental market, there are very few that fall within that, even that new LHA rate. Very brief overview now of some of the information from the census 2021 compared to the 2011. So Monmouthshire's population stands at about 93,000, which is an increase of 1.8% on the previous census. The number of households, however, has increased higher. So that's increased by about 7% to about 40,900, which is much higher than the Wales average of 3.5%. The data shows us that Monmouthshire is an ageing population. The median age has increased from 45 to 49. There's been a decline in working age residents, an increase in people aged 65 and over. In terms of the tenure of housing stock, so home ownership is by far the largest form of tenure, although it has decreased from the 2011 figures. Apologies. Has increased from decreased rather from the 2011 figures. It's still by far the largest form of tenure. What's quite interesting is to see that the private rented stock has actually increased. So that's the proportion of private rented properties within the housing stock. So there has been a bit of an increase there, which seems contrary to what we know about the private rented market. So my assumption is that what's going on here is that although the stock hasn't decreased, the number of lettings has. So it sort of implies that people aren't moving on from private rented properties, presumably because home ownerships are less affordable and there just aren't the other private rented properties to move on to. So finally then just a bit of a summary of the key findings. So the LHMA evaluates the housing needs for the period of 2022 to 2037. It finds that there are 499 additional affordable homes needed each year for the first 5 years, of which the majority are required as social rent. And there are 90 homes needed per year for the remaining 10 years. In terms of the market homes, there are 126 needed per year, of which private rented are 86 required as private rent and 41 owner-occupier. Thank you for your time. Welcome any questions?
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's very, very interesting, isn't it? A lot of figures that we can... I certainly wasn't aware of some of the figures, that's for sure. First question, I think, from Councillor Jones, please, around the map and the allocation of towns or villages.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions again, but the first one relates to that map of the Monmouthshire housing market areas on page 44. Why is Usk and Raglan incorporated into the Chepstow area because of the housing market area? Because they are so aligned with Monmouth and that area normally, and surely to have them within that area disadvantaged those wards because of the needs of some of the other areas within the Chepstow housing market area. So that's my way. Well, I'll come back to the other in a minute.
So the guidance from Welsh Government is that housing market areas should be geographical areas based on the areas that people are willing to live and travel to work. So those are based on statistical census travel to work areas. That's where those areas have been defined from. That's what was used in the previous LHMA. This is a refresh of the previous LHMA. I do take your point, absolutely. But that's where they've come from.
Well, that's very concerning, isn't it? That, you know, that's where it comes from and that's where they stay, when in fact it could disadvantage a whole area. Because everything, I mean, everybody knows that, you know, Chepstow is an area that there's south and there's north and there's middle, and Usk and Raglan are totally affiliated to Monmouthshire in every way. So, you know, regardless of where they travel, I really feel that, you know, isn't there any remit? Can't you go back to Welsh Government? Can it be looked at again? Just the rationale behind it doesn't seem sensible. It doesn't seem to help those who live within the area.
I mean, it is based on statistical travel to work areas. That's where it's come from. So,
I'm definitely not happy with that. But I mean, I accept. I mean, not with your answer. I accept where you are, but I'm not happy with that answer. I just think it's unfair. But there we are. So can I just ask about another question, Chair? Just follow on quickly. It's only a quick one. The cost of living crisis. Are you seeing it affect the number of owners in Monmouthshire? Do you expect the statistics to change about ownership? Because regardless of the income coming in, the cost of living crisis is affecting all standards, all age groups, all income people who receive incomes. And the higher the income does not make you safe anymore with the cost of mortgages as they are. And people are becoming, having to give up their homes, you know, even in the higher brackets. So are you expecting changes in future statistics relating to the cost of living crisis?
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
I'm just saying. Sorry, the cost of living crisis is going to affect affecting everybody. It's not just lower income, it is higher income. And they are really suffering as well because their income isn't proportionate to the mortgage and how it's gone up in hundreds or whatever. So they're having to give up their homes. We are seeing some of that. And I said, are you expecting the statistics to change quite a lot within the next coming years about the ownership, who owns, and the properties that are going to be available because people are going to have to go into the rental market?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, what we're finding on I suppose on a day-to-day housing need basis, if you like, the number of people that are needing rented accommodation as opposed to owner occupation. And there's probably a good batch of those people that would absolutely aspire to home ownership and not necessarily look into the private rented market. How the breakdown will potentially change, I wouldn't really like to say, but certainly we're seeing it at we're obviously seeing at the lower income level of the market in terms of people presenting as homeless, and people that are now looking at social housing. But say I suppose the so many of the clients that we deal with, and this is where it has changed, that compared with probably when we were doing 20, 30 years ago, we were providing a lot more support to people to access owner occupation, and it's tiny really what we do now compared with that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it's nobody knows, do they? But you accept that there will be changes probably in the statistics. Can I just go back, one more thing, just go back to that numbers for the housing market. It's because, of course, Chepstow's got a high number of people who want, in that table you showed, there's a high number of people who require housing, and Monmouth has got a low level, so that is why I'm saying that the Raglan Usk areas are going to be disadvantaged, because you've got areas with greater need, far greater need, in some areas around Chepstow and Maygrove perhaps. Okay, that's what I mean about they'll be disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Ian, can I just pick up on that? Because if it's becoming or will becoming detrimental to the area being Raglan, with the greatest respect, can we not challenge the status quo? I know this is a refresher, but if this is going to be detrimental going forward in the next 5 or 10 years or whatever, surely we can ask the question of Welsh Government, is this actually right? Can they not change this area of operation to incorporate a fairer evaluation or a fairer system for the rural areas? We get this a lot in Monmouthshire. I think Monmouthshire is the largest rural area in Wales as far as the county is concerned. We've got 35 square miles of Monmouthshire, and it does sometimes give us a detrimental way going forward.
I'll try and answer that then. So what you're potentially suggesting is providing the information at ward level. So there's a couple of issues with that, and one is that the LHMA is based on existing need, and it's based on projection about newly arising need, but it's also factors in things like the private rented market and house sales market. And when you're looking at that over a smaller area, the data becomes unreliable, because in a 6-month period, I had to look at Shire Newton, for example, in a 6-month period there are only 11 properties that came up for sale. So if you've got just a couple of really high or low value properties, then they skew the figures. So when you're sort of putting all the information in, it's quite hard to get that accurate, reliable data when you're doing it at such a small level. So that's why we group them together into the larger housing market areas. What we can do is quite easily is we can look at the current housing waiting list, because people will say which areas they want to live in, and we can break that down by ward area. So I haven't got that to hand today, but I can certainly provide that as an additional appendix or additional piece of information.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're talking about. And yeah, I think it would be a very good idea that you could do that, especially for ward members, because it is quite protocol, really, in the areas that we operate and are responsible for. Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you, members, for your questions. I've got a couple of questions. Sorry, from... I beg your pardon, Councillor Riley. I didn't see on the screen, so can I invite you in, please?
It's okay, I was late to the party, Chair. I have two questions. The first one is fairly simple, although I appreciate the reasons for no-fault eviction strategies that Welsh Government have introduced. I wondered whether the decrease in the rental market between 2012 and 2022 was actually related to that private rental market, I meant, sorry.
I'd say that's a distinct possibility. I mean, Rent Smart Wales came in 2016, so it could be that there was a influencing factor there in people leaving the private rented market. The only thing about that is that the data isn't telling us that the number of properties available is reducing. It's just telling us that the turnover is decreasing. So it seems to be that there's been potentially an increase in private rented prices. The LHA possibly hasn't kept pace with the increase, so that's contributing to that lack of turnover of stock.
I guess as well, the increase in mortgage for buy-to-let might influence that as well, but that was just something that just came to me now, so thank you for that. Now, I got another question that I read out earlier that I can't remember where it's come from, so I'm hoping somebody can answer it, but I appreciate if you can't. You've referred somewhere in one to the acquisition of existing homes, and I'm wondering what that would look like. And is this previously social housing? And what I'm really concerned about is who would buy it? Is that the council? Or is it a registered social landlord? And if it's a registered social landlord, are we going to expect people to bid for them, or do we have a preferred social landlord? Am I making sense? I don't always, I appreciate.
Yep, you're making sense, yeah. So acquisition of properties, yeah, so that's what we mean. It's just, it would be either an RSL or it could be ourselves buying a property that's available in the open market and converting that to provide permanent housing. It could be permanent housing or it could be temporary housing for people. Often it is buybacks, so it will be homes that were previously social housing that have been sold off under the right to buy scheme, and then our RSLs may repurchase them. The Monmouthshire Housing Association in particular have quite a good strategy for purchasing. They repurchase a number of properties each year, particularly have been doing over the last few years since we've had phosphates, which has limited the sort of development of affordable housing. The local authority can also opt to. We have purchased one property, which we are going to be providing very shortly as temporary accommodation. So in terms of the allocation, if it's temporary accommodation, it works a little bit differently. We just sort of allocate it to somebody presenting that's in housing need that meets the sort of occupancy requirements. If it's allocating, if it's one of the ourselves buying it and providing it as a permanent home, then yes, it would be allocated from the housing register. So it would be allocated to people according to priority need and who's been waiting the longest and maximises the occupancy.
Can I just clarify one thing? So how do you determine who buys it? What is the competitive element to who buys it? If you're acquiring it, that's the local authority acquiring it? Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that works.
So, I mean, we've only bought a very small number of properties. We've only bought one actually from the open market, and that was agreed by Cabinet. If it's an RSL buying it, I mean, they would just they would go and view the property, they would put an offer on it, and the same as anybody buying it from the open market, really. Does that answer your query?
I am a little confused as to how they become available if you acquire them.
Apologies for cutting in there. Yeah, so somebody would just put it for sale on the open market. So somebody decides that they want to sell their property, they list it, same as any of us would do if we were selling our property, and then we will have a look. If we're looking to purchase something, we will just have a look at what is currently available on the open market. If it's one of the RSLs, they will do the same, but they also sometimes people contact us directly and they contact the RSLs directly, particularly if it was previously social housing, to say that they are wanting to sell their property and would we or the RSL be interested in buying them.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Strong, please.
Thank you. I've been sort of sat here thinking, you know, we recently sort of passed a motion to become an age sort of friendly sort of county. We've got an ageing population. The median age is 49. I don't want to labour the point that Councillor Jones and obviously Councillor Crook have made, but with those areas of housing need, if we don't factor in that quite a large proportion of people will not be travelling to work because they'll be retired or semi-retired or moving to leafy parts of Usk to, you know, to have a semi-retirement, you know, we're skewing the numbers really. So that was one point. And the other point is adapted properties. How are we ensuring that we have enough adapted properties, not just for people with dementia, which is mentioned in the report, but people that have life-changing events? You know, we could all, you know, we don't want to sort of wish that on anybody, but we can all have something that means that we might become less mobile or less able, and we might want to move from a property that, you know, met our needs a week or so ago, but we've got to come out of hospital, and how do we make sure that those properties are available for people that not just sort of, you know, that need them really? Does that make sense?
In terms of the first point, I think, like I said beforehand, it's difficult to go down to a ward level because the information just gets less reliable and less robust. I certainly can provide the housing need figures. Maybe I can go away and have a little think about whether it's possible to group them together in another way, but it might be difficult to do that with this LHMA now, given that we're kind of working to a bit of a deadline. But I mean, certainly for the next rewrite that gets done in a couple of years' time, we can review that methodology and have a look at doing that in a different way, if that would be acceptable. In terms of the accessible adapted properties, yes, there are a shortfall of them. We do know that people on average wait longer for accessible accommodation than for general needs accommodation. All affordable housing that is built now, all new built affordable housing that's grant funded, will be built to what's called lifetime home standards. So all properties have to be adaptable for people should their needs change in the future. So like doorways are wider, wet rooms are provided on the downstairs, there's space to install stair lifts or 3-4 lifts if that's what's needed. So that's something that is happening now, which will kind of help in the future. Ground floor flats could be an option. That if they're level access, that could be an option for people, particularly if people don't require fully wheelchair adapted accommodation. In reality, I think it's quite difficult to deliver. I mean, we're not able to meet all the need as it is. You know, even people that are homeless households who are on the highest banding, they're waiting 10, 11 months for accommodation. So there is overall a shortfall of all types of affordable housing. So we kind of do what we can, but in reality, we're never going to be able to provide enough to meet everyone's needs.
Thank you. Can I ask Hazel to sum up, please? Yeah,
so pretty much in terms of a summary, we've talked about the definition and the tenure of affordable housing. The officers have explained the methodology and the data sources for the local housing market assessment. We also discussed the need for specific and supported housing for various groups, such as homeless people, older people, people with mental health needs and children and young people. Members asked questions about the methodology, the definition and the tenures of affordable housing, the income thresholds and affordability levels, the housing market areas, the census data and the impact of the cost of living crisis on the number of homeowners in Monmouthshire. I think the committee felt the inclusion of Usk and Raglan in the Chepstow housing market area was felt to be potentially disadvantaging those wards due to different needs and affiliations of those areas. Members are recognising that the county having an ageing population, they would ask that officers consider this concern and explore perhaps other methods such as the housing register to give a more accurate picture. And the committee asks that officers challenge Welsh Government perhaps on the applicability of the statistical travel to work areas census data for determining the housing market areas in Monmouthshire. Is there anything else you'd like to include, or does that capture it?
Thank you, Hazel, very much. So moving on then to conclude with this local housing market assessment and refreshment plan. Obviously in front of us we have two options, option 1 and option 2, and clearly option 1, as far as I can see, fulfills and is recommended to go forward to the Cabinet for their future decisions. Are you all in agreement with that? Yeah. Thank you very much. So we can go on with number 6 on the agenda. I don't know whether the officers, the officers want to go, or do you want to stay, or
Stay if they like.
Stay.
We're just finishing up the work.
Okay, fine. So so if we look at the agenda item 6, and that's our forward plan for June planning provision of school and places, and July being revised net reduction strategy. But I think, Hazel, you have something that would bring forward, please.
Yes, Chair. Since this agenda was published, we have updated the work programme to include items that were suggested at the last meeting as well, which is that we look at the blue badge scheme. We want to look at the criteria and how that's applied. We've also had a request from officers to consider a report that is about care leavers and having care as a protected characteristic. So would you be happy for that to come to perhaps the June meeting? And if we can, we're likely to want external people in to talk about the blue badge. So I think I'll need to sort of speak to the different organisations that you requested and see what their availability is. But that takes us pretty much up to September, Chair, in terms of our work programme.
So are the members in agreement with that? Are you okay going forward? Thank you very much. So moving on then to item 7, which is the Council and Cabinet Work Planner we have in front of us. It goes up until July 2025. So there's an awful lot of information in there. Do I need anybody to accept that, Hazel, or is it just for our information going forward?
It's for your information, but it's something that members should keep an eye on, because you might see reports in there that are going forward that you might want to take a look at, you might want to scrutinise, you might just individually, you might have interest in it and want to see it, and you might want to get hold of that officer and ask to see that report. That's your right to do so. We don't scrutinise everything that goes forward for decision. You set your work programmes, and it wouldn't be practical to scrutinise everything, but there might be something there that you just have interest in and you want to know about, and you can go and ask for sight of that report, okay? Or you can suggest that it's brought forward for scrutiny.
Thank you, Hazel. Yeah, Councillor Strong, I think you have something you want to say on it?
I've just noticed that it probably needs to be updated, because there's officers on there that have moved to different jobs, so that there might be sort of new people in post.
Yeah, we'll note that. I think Democratic Services look after this plan, and it might be looking a bit retrospectively as well. So you might see some items that have been planned in there, and officers were still in post at the time but have since moved on. But it's a useful forward-looking document as well to see what's going forward for individual cabinet member decision. For instance, they wouldn't be brought through to scrutiny process, but you're still able to have sight of those or request, you know, to talk to an officer about them, and it lists the report author as well.
Thank you, Councillor Strong, for that. So we'll move on to the agenda item 8, which was the previous minutes. Apologies, I wasn't at that meeting, so I can't make any observations on that. So are there any observations, or is everybody in agreement with those minutes? I think they're on page 89 and 90 and 91 and 92. Yeah, Hazel, come on in, please.
Just for members to note, and we did raise this briefly in the pre-meeting, minutes are not a verbatim record of the meeting, so you'll see that I try and summarise some of the main concerns of members as we go, just so that officers leave with something useful to go forward with. And we use Copilot, which is AI as well, to help us. I'm really not that on it. I do have some help. And my colleague Robert is at home today. He lists some of the questions, but things will not always be captured as question answer in a verbatim style, but we do have a transcript, which is part of the team's software. So if anybody wanted to sort of watch something back on the recording and they think that they saw something was said at a meeting and they want to double check that, we keep the transcripts and you can ask to see those, but you won't always find what you might have said listed in minutes in a sort of word-for-word style, but we do have transcripts. If anybody wants to see them, you can ask to see them, okay?
Thank you, Hazel. So is it in order that I sign those minutes as being a true record of that meeting? Thank you. Just to update you, the reason why I asked Hazel to do the summary, because we're using the same format, which tells us exactly, so it gives it a more accurate figure of the summing up, rather than somebody individual like a silly old chairman like myself would make an accreditation or something similar. It is an accurate assumption of what we've been saying through the meeting. So with that in mind, can I just confirm that the next meeting is Tuesday, the 11th of June at 10 a.m. So I then close the meeting of the 16th. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.